Hello, everybody. My name is Jim Farmer. I'm the festival director of Out on Film, Atlanta's LGBTQ Film Festival. Landmark Theaters is doing their second annual retro replay Pride series starting in June. One of the films that is playing is The Extraordinary Milk. It screens June 11th in Atlanta and at Landmark Theaters across the country. I am so excited and honored to be speaking with the writer, the Academy Award winning writer of Milk, Dustin Lance Black. Thank you so much for talking to us. And again, thank you so much for your work and your in this film.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, thanks very much. I'm so pleased to hear it's, still out there in the world, this story.
I watched this recently and it just is still as topical as ever, especially with what is going on in the world right now.
Yeah, yeah. It more topical than ever in some ways. And I think that's part of its lesson. And not just this story, but any of sort of civil rights stories and equality stories and social justice stories. I think Harvey Milk, Bayard Rustin, these men who I've really admired, all would tell you the work is never done, and minority rights always have to be protected, and we
Yeah.
have to be vigilant about it. And so when young people come and say, "Well, we're doing all this work, when's it going to be complete?" I say, "Never," and that's the good news, because it does it feeds your soul. And so it's hard and it's heartbreaking sometimes, but it feeds your soul. And I think that's what fueled Harvey.
Yeah. When did you first start working on this project?
A really long time ago now, I would imagine almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I was working on an HBO series called Big Love
Yeah.
for years, which afforded me, the freedom to write something on spec, meaning I wasn't paid. It was no one else's idea. It was just something I was passionate about. And so yeah, almost 20 years ago, I drove to Palm Springs and met up with a man named Cleve Jones, and who started sharing stories
Mhm.
about Harvey Milk, and then started introducing me to the other folks who were still around. Thankfully, many of them were still around, and I started to build out a story, starting with what little I knew, and let it grow into what became the film.
When did you first start learning about Harvey Milk?
I think I first heard his name and story when I was doing theater up in San Francisco as a teenager in high school. I would do theater in the Central Coast of Western Stage. I would go up to ACT in the Bay Area, and it was a tough time. This was at the height of the AIDS epidemic. There was no treatment, no cure, and people were dying. My mentors were dying very quickly. And though the ending is tragic, one of the hopeful stories they shared was of days when Harvey Milk was leading a liberation movement, and it was working. And so I would first hear it there, and it would take many years for me to understand just how critical his message was for 2008, 2009, and like you said before, still today.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
There's so much to talk about with Harvey, but how did you, I know you've been asked this before, but how did you, and I know you did a lot of research, but how did you sort of condense this into a film when you could have, talk, I mean, there was just so much to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, his life was so rich before
Yeah.
he started work moving to before he moved to San Francisco with Scott and started in on his work in the movement. And sure, there's a book out there called The Mayor of Castro Street that goes into in depth into everything that came before. And then there's a documentary that about Harvey Milk, the Times of Harvey Milk, that goes into everything that happened after. Um,
Exactly.
and I drew from my lesson at this point in my career. I think it's when a lot of people first came to know who I am, but it certainly was far from my first project or far from my first produced project. So I learned a lot of lessons, thankfully, at this point, and knew you can only bite off so much story.
Yeah.
and be able to go deep enough that it resonates emotionally. Really great lessons I learned cutting my teeth at HBO. And so I made the decision to really just focus on that time when Harvey and Scott decided to go and then landed in San Francisco and the movement he built in there. And so, and I also felt like having watched the documentary and watched how the documentary struggled to kind of get back to its heart and its core when it went so in depth into the White Night riots and what happened after Harvey's assassination. I sort of learned from, it's not really a mistake, but I learned from that. I said, well, I'm not going to do that. And I think I'm going to fill mine with the more personal relationships.
Yeah.
So then some others had attempted, versions of it that were strictly political. And I thought, no, but the political is personal in this story. So let's keep it personal. And so that became my focus. That was my timeline, and that was my focus. Let's aim for people's hearts, and if we succeed, then maybe we'll be able to change a few minds. But that's the order it goes: hearts to
Yeah.
mind.
Okay, great. Can you talk about working with Gus?
Yeah, it was a dream. He was I had met Gus. We'd worked with the same cinematographer. I'd worked with him on commercials. Gus had worked with him on other things, and an introduction had been made years earlier. And thankfully, he remembered me when I brought him the first draft of the spec script. And he knew the story well because it's something he had wanted to do.
Hmm.
Uh, couldn't get it, done back in the day. So he just flipped open the script to a random page. He said he was going to do this. I'm sitting there in his kitchen and he's flipped it open and he starts reading a scene right in the middle. And he just looks at me and he goes, "Oh, it's good." I went, "Well, I hope so. Yeah." And he eventually would read the rest of it and agree to do it. But it's a rare thing in this town these days for a writer and a director to work in the ways we did, and it was just very symbiotic, very collaborative. We were knee to knee for every shot of the film, and I think you feel it when you're watching it.
Yeah.
It was a very small, this was not a big movie. It was really like, I also was a producer on the film, and I wore a lot of hats, and he really leaned on me to keep things accurate and authentic, and that was part of my assignment from him. And I just loved watching, he and I had a lot of conversations about what the heart of it was and what these friendships were, what this community was and how new it was. And I felt every day he tried to keep it emotionally authentic.
Yeah. Sean Penn deservedly won an Oscar for the film, as did you. But when I think about the film, I think about such a strong ensemble. Can you sort of talk about the ensemble in this film and how y'all work together so well?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully it was an ensemble because it's hard to, it's only been what, 16 years,
Mhm.
and yet the entire world of queer cinema has changed.
Yeah.
It was damn near impossible to get a movie like this made only 16 years ago
Yeah.
because it had a gay central character. And, and because that gay central character dared to be political about who he was. And, it was only thanks to casting first with Sean, then I think we went to James and Emil and really just put together a cast that became increasingly undeniable as potentially profitable if those who decided to finance it spent little enough, right? We didn't have much money to make this, but it was, I think, them betting on that cast more than anything. And now
I
Jim
have
has
it.
the
I have it.
building.
I have a loud dog downstairs. I was just
I
told.
know. I could hear it. I don't mind. I don't mind. I just thought it was hilarious. You got to keep that in. Like that was like a great turn.
Um,
Like no one saw that coming, Jim. You just left. You're like, you know what? This answer, he's giving me this shit. I'm out of here.
Thanks for
Uh,
making me laugh. Um, Talk to me about Oscar night. What are your memories of Oscar night?
I mean, it was the whole Academy Award thing with this movie was just so wildly unexpected. Our hopes and dreams, and when I say our, like it was really me, Gus, and Sean. I mean, that was the real team.
Yeah.
And I think our hope was just that it would get made and then that maybe we'd get it into theaters because we had at that point Focus involved. We certainly never imagined it would get enough attention to end up on that big stage. I mean, and then I don't remember how many nominations it earned, but it was a lot. And we were one of the leading contenders in many, many categories. And so that was, I mean, if I'm being honest, terrifying and unexpected. And you know, I especially then I was a very shy, introverted guy. I had not had much time in front of a, you know, big audience, and here I was potentially going to be in front of one of the biggest, you know, viewing audiences there is each year, and so I remember sitting almost catatonic in a chair near my mom the night before. My mom had flown out, despite being in chemotherapy and ill. She was going to make it to the Oscars, and she just looked at me and she just said, "You know, maybe just think about what it is you would have wanted to hear
Hmm.
if somebody got up there when you were a kid and you could have heard them with a film like this and the themes like this." And I just sat and went, "Oh, that's a good idea." And honestly, I have very few memories of that night itself. Um, I think the adrenaline hits and does something. But I do remember getting up there, knowing that it was a gay producer who I'd later work with and love, who was producing the Oscars that year, and that he dared not cut me off if I was, you know, speaking from the heart. So, and that's true. I think my speed, I saw that clock hit zero and I was barely into it, and I just kept on talking, and I never heard the orchestra strike up. So it worked out.
When I was growing up, there was so little LGBTQ representation, and there. And when I mean, there just wasn't much at all. And I was always so impressed with the fact that even though this was a small production, I mean, it had such a huge impact, and it played in theaters across the country, and it had such a great acclaim. But what when you were growing up, what was the first time you saw any queer representation that mattered or that registered?
I mean, I was Mormon military and growing up in Texas. So almost nothing. I
Okay.
mean, really almost nothing. And I probably wouldn't, you know, it's why when I heard Harvey's story in San Francisco I must have been 15, 16 maybe. It was so impactful because I'd not really heard a hero narrative about a gay person. Certainly not in my home, not then. And so, I mean, Harvey was one of the first, I'm sure. I remember seeing at some point in college, I mean, it's that late, when I finally had access to the UCLA Film School's archive, where I was able to watch some queer documentaries.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I watched Doing Time on Maple Drive. I remember that. I couldn't tell you the details of any scene, but I remember thinking it's Jim Carrey in a dramatic role, as I recall. And I remember being really moved and shocked, stunned, really. I mean, it's wild. I mean, you know, it's wild how much progress we've made in a very short amount of time in terms of on-screen representation. Um, it's hard for me knowing what we had to go through to get Milk made.
Exactly.
Um, and thank God for Brokeback Mountain making money because it was one of those first indications there was an audience. And Um, but there wasn't much out there at all, and it was really hard to find unless you lived in a big city, San Francisco, LA, New
Yeah,
York, maybe. But listen, the video store in San Antonio, Texas, had no queer content, and even if they would have stocked it, there was almost none to be had. There was very little that had been made.
exactly. I wanted to give you a shout out as well on Rustin, starring the amazing Coleman Domingo. Thank you so much for that project because it touched so many people and really brought to light his life. So thank you for that.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, that was another, 10-year journey. They take a long time, these things.
Exactly. We talked about this earlier, but this film just feels so topical with all this going on in the world. Violence against gay people. It just you look now at things that people get away with, and I remember back when the person when Harvey was killed and all that. I mean, can you sort of talk about how this film lives on and how it just still feels so relevant today?
Well, I think one of the things in Rustin, I try to do the same. Certainly in Milk, it's there, which is these are moments in history. The Harvey Milk getting elected and defeating Proposition 6 back then.
Yeah.
Bayard Rustin organizing the March on Washington, which has become so iconic.
Mhm.
And these it's you I hope become engaged in the emotional story, and it's the heart that makes things stick to the mind. I really believe that when people are moved, stuff will stick to the mind. If you can't move people, you can tell them the truth all day long and it'll never really register and they won't know what to do with it.
Mhm.
So if you're able to tell a story that's moving and then in it give some roadmap for how these fights were won, how these successful moments were accomplished, um, then it will resonate in a way that is future. It's looking forward. It's not nostalgic, and because nostalgia is useless, I think. And so what I loved about it, and it's what it probably feels topical because we're fucking up in our movements in the same ways folks were before Rustin and before Harvey. And that is we've lost our again, and this is a cycle. This happens all the time, but we've really lost our connection to one another
Mhm.
and our connection to other movements outside of ours. And without those coalitions, um, Bayard Rustin, was very clear with the march that it needed to be a fight for jobs and freedom because the jobs issue was important to people who were not Black at the time, and they could agree on this thing and they found commonality and they were able to build a coalition. Same thing with Harvey. He didn't just win the election by saying to gay people, vote for me. He would have lost. He went to union workers and said, how can we help you get a living wage? He went to the Chinese community. How do we get those ballots in Mandarin so your vote counts in this city? To seniors so they had affordable housing, and on and on and on. These films to me at their best are a roadmap for how to rebuild movements when they become fractured and broken, because they always become fractured and broken, and it becomes the discrimination Olympics, and people in their examination of self say, oh, I have it worse than you, or I have it worse in this way than you. And instead of stopping there, they divide and subdivide. And all of a sudden, we're so easily defeated. Divide and conquer. It's the oldest trick in the book. It's what's happened to us again right now. The reason we're falling behind right now is because we divided ourselves. And, I think that self-examination of how bad do you have it and what do you need to have changed in order to have a more equal shot, that's great work. But there is no prize for proving that you're at the bottom of the pile.
Mhm.
And it's hard because there should be comfort, but it's not how life works. The prize is knowing that it's really hard for you, maybe even harder for you than other people in your same movement, but still locking arms, still keeping the coalition alive. Because without those coalitions inside our community and the ones we need to make outside our community, we lose every single fucking time. The ballot box, you got to get to 50.1% or you're screwed. If you're determined to just prove you have it worse than everybody else and to be in your own little group of those people who have it so bad, I feel for you, but you're gonna lose. And for our community, that can be deadly.
Yeah.
And so I think they feel it feels topical because we've found ourselves back in a moment of extreme division in our movement, and certainly we've lost those coalitions that helped us win. And so, check out Milk again, check out Rustin now, see how they did it, see what they built, and understand that no matter how well worded your tweet or your post is, it ain't gonna do shit. You have to organize. You have to get out into the real world and rebuild coalitions.
Hmm.
That's why I think sadly, these things feel topical, but it's why I made them.
Exactly. Would you say that we have a current day Harvey Milk?
No. I mean, I think he was very much one of a kind,
Yeah.
and that's okay. I think I hope there are people who will be, their own leaders in our communities, and the challenges are slightly different now.
Yeah.
And so no, but I keep my eye out for new folks, and I've thrown my hat into the ring in political ways as well, and it's hard work and it's exhausting, and sometimes we have to take a break,
Yeah.
which I've also done. Not for long, not for much longer. But I do keep my eye out for new leaders in the movement. And I also keep my eye out for people who are posing as leaders. And in fact, what they seem to be doing is making us subdivide more. And I don't know that they understand the great harm they're doing in that quote unquote leadership role.
Yeah. One quick final question. What are you working on next?
I have a lot going on. I won't bore you with all of it. I recently moved back to Los Angeles after a decade in the UK to support my husband's efforts, and now it's my turn again, as we say in our family. And being back in LA means I'm working a lot. So I have 5 TV series and 2 movies right now. None that I'm gonna announce right here and now, but yeah, there's a lot coming, and I think there's a lot that needs to be said, and I'll do my very best to make some things that are helpful.
Great. Thank you so much for talking to me. Thank you so much for the film, which is still, again, as relevant as it always is. Milk plays June 11th at Landmark Theaters in Atlanta and around the country. Please join us. We'll have a lovely discussion afterwards. Thank you so much. Say hello to Tom and the kids. Thank you for taking time and have a great
Yeah.
day.
All right. Send in
Thanks,
love. All right. Bye. Bye, Atlanta.
thanks so much.